Okay, so one of the reasons that hip hop has proved vital over the years is its endless capacity for world building. From producers to personal assistants, hip hop has long mythologized the people that orbit rappers, and our next guest, who's worked with a lot of people, some of whom you might know, Lil Uzi Vert, Childish Gambino, Playboi Carti, the list goes on. Through her, I think people are beginning to understand one of recorded music's most valuable but kind of more obscured professions, which is the engineer. So please welcome Kesha Lee. Hi.
Hi.
All the way from Atlanta.
Yeah.
Via Birmingham, Alabama. So let's start kind of at the beginning. There's different types of sound engineering, but can you break down what it is that you do?
I'm mainly a recording engineer, and then sometimes I'll mix the people that I record. But I mainly just record the vocals, capture their voice to the beat, and yeah.
Can we break that down a little bit more, though? Like, what does a recording engineer do versus what a mixing engineer might do? And how does your role, because I think you work in a particularly unique way, how does it kind of touch on both?
So when I'm recording, I just kind of keep the session organized, clean it up sonically as we go. Mainly for like Uzi, if we don't choose to go with another mixer, I'm the mix engineer, so I try to mix as we record, because I know once he gets ready to put the song out, he's not gonna want to spend too much time waiting on it to get mixed. So, and then I'll add like little creative elements, like beat drops or duplicates in the beat and stuff within the vocals, whether it's like pitching the voice or something. So.
How often are you mixing after the fact?
Like after we're done recording or before the song comes out?
After you're done recording. Because you said you mix a lot as you go,
Mm-hmm.
but how
Other
often?
than that, by that time it's just like maybe like an hour or two, depending on how far I got with the mix. And then if I had like a lot of ideas while I was recording, there's not much for me to go back on when it's time to mix, so it doesn't take too long.
One of the things we were talking about yesterday is you're saying that you feel like the recording engineer is actually becoming more vital to being able to make creative decisions than the mixing engineer, who I think historically has been associated with making more of the creative decisions in the past. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, I was speaking to this engineer. He's like an older engineer, and I learned that like back then they recorded vocals dry, so there wasn't a lot of effects, there wasn't reverb and delay, and the song really came to life when the mix engineer worked on it. And they were working with like a lot of analog, and they had track outs, so stuff didn't come already sounding a certain way, and like I said, they brought it to life. But now I feel like recording engineers, especially with us working like more in digital, we get to, add stuff while they're recording and pick the delay times, reverb, and like I said, edits to the beat. And then the artist lives with that for so long that by the time it's time for it to get mixed, they don't want it to, be changed. They want it pretty much like the reference. So at that point, the mix engineer kind of just enhances the sound, clean it up, make it knock harder. I'm sure there's still mixing engineers that really like add a lot to the song, but for the most part, in hip hop, I've noticed you don't change much after the recording.
I think it would also be helpful to kind of understand how transferable some of these skills are. Like, and we'll talk a bit more about you going to school for all of this stuff and how you got into recording specifically. But do you need to be able to know how to record in order to mix? And then, where does mastering fit into all of this?
I think it's easier if you start off recording, because you work with so many different people's voices. You learn how to clean up as you go. So if you work with someone who has a lot of highs in their voice, you kind of, learn how to work with that, or someone who has a lot of boominess. So that kind of just leads you into mixing and being a good mix engineer, because especially as a recording engineer, you're in different environments. Like, when I was on tour, we were recording either in a dressing room, on a bus, or in the hotel. And then, I definitely have experience recording in a traditional studio. So just having different environments, you learn how to work with that, and that makes you, become a really good mixing engineer. So you can jump into mixing, but it is better to start off recording and then become a mixing engineer. And then as far as mastering, I do feel like mastering is just a whole nother beast. Like, you can throw a limiter, that doesn't mean you're mastering, it just means you're trying to make the song louder. I feel like there's so much more that goes into it that, they didn't really touch on it that much in school, but I think there's like coding and stuff that goes into it, so, and then just making it even throughout and just even on all playbacks, so.
Are you thinking about, like, when you're recording and mixing, are you thinking about, are you making any decisions that would impact the mastering process, like when you're working on a track?
The only thing, I'm still learning a lot, but the only thing I do when I mix, I be sure to like turn it down 7 to 10 dB before I send it to mastering. You don't ever want to send in a song already hot, because they need headroom to work with.
You talked a bit about artists kind of getting attached to the reference track. I think that's really interesting, especially within hip-hop, where artists are really prolific, and they want to put out stuff when they want to put out stuff. So can you talk a bit about that, I guess, and kind of your experience with artists who are like attached to the rough or want to release the rough, and how that might impact the way that you're working?
Yeah, so in the beginning, sometimes when I work with the artists before they get really big, they'll get the rough version of the song, like when we record, and I bounce that down and I send that to them, and they'll just put that out, and I'm just like, wait a minute. But yeah, they play that song so much, whether they're, on their phone or in the Sprinter, and they just keep hearing it, and it's like by the time, you want to go back and change something, they're cool with how it sounds already, so they don't want any changes to it. But yeah.
So I think to give people a sense of what you're talking about here, we're gonna play a song that you've worked on, that you've worked through different stages. So this is, actually, yeah, can you set up what we're gonna hear, and then we can talk about it more in depth throughout, but what are we gonna hear?
Okay, so this is a song with no plugins. So like I wanted to kind of show the rough and then the mix and then the master, but when you're someone's recording and mix engineer and you're trying to mix as you go, there's not the biggest difference between the rough and the mix. So I just bounced down something with like no plugins. So I don't know how it sounds, but I'll play that.
And what track is this?
This is Uzi New Patek. Then this is the song that I recorded once, bounced down once we finished recording. This is the mix, but it's really low because it's down 7.
So maybe, do you want to talk through kind of the different things that we heard there and what people might be hearing or not hearing in terms of the choices that were being made?
So with Uzi, we record with the TLM 103, which we feel like that's the best mic for him. I've tried other mics like the U87 and just whatever's at the studio, but that one just sounds the best. And then his setup's really simple. It goes through the Avalon S37, 737 SP, and then, yeah, so I guess the first one sounds a little bit more like dull, and then the recording, I know the ad-libs are loud as hell, but it's a little bit more clear than the, finished one. Basically, I have a template, and then I open up the bandwidths a little bit more and add a little bit high. And with Uzi, we don't get track outs unless it's for the album. So that was a 2-track, and it's not much you can do, but I use Vitamin on the 2-track. And then for the mix, like I said, just turn it down 7 dB and send it to mastering.
When you say track outs, you mean like stems, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's EQ. Yeah.
The question was, what's Vitamin?
Yeah.
So you do some freelance work for other artists, but you are primarily Lil Uzi Vert's recording engineer. And yesterday we talked a little bit about like why it's important for an artist to kind of have that relationship with the recording engineer. So yeah, do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah. Well, I just thought it was preference, like that's who they feel comfortable working with. But as I started working one-on-one with someone more, I realized file management is a big thing. When you're using multiple engineers, some may leave the files on the computer. Unless you're a bigger artist, most people watch you and make sure you clear it off the computer. Some may have it on their personal hard drive. The artist may have their own hard drive. So it's just all over the place. So when you have a set engineer, they keep everything and they have it organized in a way where they can find songs if, the artist may not have finished the song. They can just say that this song with this producer or this song where I said this, and then you can pull it right up. And normally I organize stuff in a way where if you finish the song, I make sure to put the artist's name, the producer, and then I name the song whatever he says the most in the hook. Because normally when people recall a song, they say the hook. And
so you're naming Uzi's tracks, basically?
Yeah, but when it comes out, he'll rename it. So New Patek, I called it 5-minute song because it was 5 minutes long, and that was just an easy way for me to remember it. And then I asked him, what do you want to rename it? Sometimes it doesn't get renamed, but I like when he gets creative and think of something different. But he definitely needed to change it from 5 minute, but and then also the difference like in lingo. So an artist may have a certain way of saying something, and when you're learning someone for the first time, you may not catch what they mean, and as an artist, it kind of takes you out of your element when you're recording, when you have to tell them, no, I meant this, or, or like, let's say someone says, start me from the top, and if you're not paying attention while you're recording, you may start them at the top of the song, but they may have meant top of where I'm working at. Some people don't, specify what they mean, but, if you know that person, you know exactly what they're talking about, and that can keep the artist in their vibe and focused. And then also just a consistency in sound. So, I noticed a lot of artists, when they bounce around, they call and they get frustrated, like, they don't got me sounding right, and I'm like, I give my template out, like, because that's just what they're comfortable with. But I don't know why, they say it doesn't sound the same, but it's just important to have a consistency in sound, because it changes the vibe of the record and what they come up with when it doesn't sound a certain way to them. So that's
yeah, we can get a bit more into that with Uzi specifically, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you started working with Lil Uzi Vert.
I was brought in to Atlantic for a songwriting session. KJ had hit me about it. And when I was working, Cannon came in and he saw me working. Cannon is who found Uzi and got him signed. And he liked the way I worked and he's like, you're hired. And at that time I was freelancing. So I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a studio engineer. But I had always wanted to work at Main Street. So I was down, to work.
On Cannon Studio.
And DJ Drama and Lake runs it. But he was like, I have this artist that I want you to work with. So when we had our first session, I think he asked Uzi how it went. He also asked me how to like working with him, and I was like, I think he's dope. I actually told him like, that's my new favorite artist. Like him and Gucci are my favorite. And yeah, so he checked with Uzi, and Uzi said like he wanted me as his engineer, and I've just been working with him since.
What were your first impressions of him as an artist?
I thought he was dope. Like I just liked his tone. And just like how because sometimes artists, they'll pick a beat and it may not necessarily be one that, you know, I would pick or whatever. But then when you hear what they do to it, it's like, it's fire. And he would do that a lot, and I was like, he's dope.
I want to play an older Lil Uzi Vert track. It's not that old, actually. It's one of my favorite tracks anyway, and it's from Lil Uzi Vert versus The World, which came out in 2016, I believe it was. I'm gonna check that. But yeah, this is a song off that project called Scott and Ramona. So that was a track called Scott and Ramona from Lil Uzi Vert versus The World, which did come out in 2016 and was produced by Wonder Girl. So you recorded that track. I wanted to play it just because I thought it kind of fed in nicely to what you were saying, which is, you know, Uzi kind of stands out because it's what he does with the beat. Do you remember recording that song at all?
Yeah, I feel like I was in a different place then. Like when he first came out, we were like trying anything. Like now we're just...
Like what?
Like I would do all sorts of stuff to the track. It's just, I do feel like I've grown, but it's just cool hearing all the things that I was like fearless to try. But you know, when you're working on something, you don't know how far it's gonna go. But it's cool hearing it.
Can you give us some insight into how he records? Is it project-based? Is it kind of prolific, like anytime, any place?
This guy will live in the studio. Like, I'm always there. I leave to shower, and sometimes I leave to sleep at the hotel, but most of the time I'm sleeping. So I work in Philly, and you know, he has all his friends in the studio, so I like go to the storage closet because it's like the only place that I can have to myself. So I go in there and I just go to sleep, like if there's downtime. But yeah, we're always in the studio. He's always recording. Yeah. He just likes to go through beats, and then when he hears one he like, he'll go in the booth. And sometimes he'll stay in the booth, like if he'll try something on a beat and then he'll like just pull up another one, and he'll stay in there and try a song. So there's a lot of unfinished songs, but he's so productive. He tries to make sure that he finishes like 1 or 2 songs each session.
And how collaborative is your relationship, like in terms of you being able to make creative decisions, but also, I mean, you told me that like sometimes he'll come and do his own drops.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I hear something, I'll just do it. And if he doesn't like it, he'll tell me take it out. If he likes it, he'll keep it. And we'll bounce ideas off of each other. He'll be like, oh, duplicate that, do it like again, or do it at this part of the verse. And then sometimes he likes a lot of drops, so I'll just put the track on latch and then the waveform on mute, and then he'll sit down in the engineer chair and then he'll press the mute button where he wants the drops, and then I'll go back in and clean it up and make sure it hits on the one or the kick or whatever. So
are you breaking any rules, any of the like rules of recording or mixing when you're working with Uzi? I asked that because he is pretty sonically adventurous, so I just wondered if there's any like rules of the trade that you guys are like, no, and it's contributing to part of the sound?
I guess maybe. Like, I don't care if a plugin is for a guitar or whatever. I'll just use it on vocals or whatever on the beat. And then I know we do a lot of things we're not supposed to acoustically. Like, record on the bus when it's, we did it once. We did one song where we were recording on the bus when it was moving, but I told him, like, if you want to do anything with this song, you got to re-record it. But yeah, I'm just like trying to learn different spaces. I do feel like it makes you a better engineer if you can record in an environment that's not the greatest and still be able to clean it up and make it sound good. Because we're not always in a recording studio, because he, like I said, he likes to stay busy. So we may have to record in the hotel or whatever, so.
And you were just on tour for 2 months.
That was crazy. The tour was cool. It was basically, it gets really routine. There's bus call times, and we have to be there at a certain time. If not, the bus will leave you. And you just ride to the next city. We go to the venue, and he performs like around 8, so we try to get there early, and there's just a lot of downtime up until he performs. And then sometimes we leave right after the show, or we'll stay to 2 a.m., and that's for the bus driver to sleep to drive to the next city. So it's a lot of checking in and hotel, a lot of moving, a lot of, packing up the studio, breaking it down, and yeah, it was crazy.
What do you bring on tour with you, or on the road?
I kept that set up super, super simple because I didn't want to have to carry a lot. I was already carrying a lot. But it was just the Apollo Twin, my laptop, the TLM 103, we used the Chaotica, and yeah, that's it.
So this has been about only 5 years of your career, right? You've been doing this for about 5 years now. Mm-hmm. How did you get to this point? You're from Birmingham, Alabama. You moved, or you were working at the radio in Birmingham?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I knew I wanted to do music, and we had a radio personality in Birmingham named Buck Wild, and he had a Facebook, so I messaged him on Facebook asking could I intern, and he did. He got me an internship at the radio station. And I did the overnight shift, so I worked at a bakery at 6 in the morning, so as soon as I left the radio station, I'd have to go work at the bakery. And I was doing soundboard ops, so I was just making sure the program ran on time. And another radio personality that I was interning under named Willis Pride, he noticed that, I guess I was good at cutting the commercials with Adobe, and he told me that I should talk to Isis about, going to the school she went to. She went to Full Sail, and she was
in Florida, right?
Mm-hmm. And she just told me about like different programs, and that I should look into engineering. So at the time, I didn't even know what engineering was. I didn't know, what it entailed. So I researched it, and I found my school, or just schools in Atlanta. And my mom gave me a week to find my school, find an apartment, and move to Atlanta. And I made it happen. I got it. It's like a 1-year school, but I took the test, and I was able to get accepted, and I went, and yeah, that's how I found engineering.
Well, one of the other things you told me was that you got interested in engineering because you wanted to record yourself.
Yeah, at one point I wanted to be a singer. I was just getting frustrated with like how my stuff sounded, and then I'm really shy, like I'm nervous right now. But I would be so nervous like recording with someone in the room, even though he was an engineer, and you just hear my voice shaking in the track. So I was like, okay, I need to learn how to record myself. So I heard we have like a music store, it's called Bailey Brothers, and they offered classes on Pro Tools. So I learned that Pro Tools was like an industry standard. And so I didn't want to go to school. Like, I was just over it. I went to college for like 1.5 years. So I was like, okay, let me just get a Pro Tools certification. And so when I was looking at schools, when I was interning, my school offered the Pro Tools certification. And then I saw that it was only like a year school, so I was like, okay, I'll go there. But when I was there, they taught you everything, like how to make cables, live sound, recording, making beats, and then like music business, computer science. And I just took to recording more. And I didn't want to like sing anymore. I just wanted to do that.
Yeah, I mean, can you talk just a little bit about that? You kind of had this dream to be a singer. Maybe it wasn't a dream, maybe it was just something you were really interested in and wanted to do. What was it about recording where you're like, oh no, this is going to be like my plan A?
To me, it's like video games. I mean, I don't play video games, but it's just something that I can sit and do all day. I love like all the hotkeys. Like, I'm really fast at Pro Tools, so I just enjoy that, like especially with singers and all the stacking and panning, and I playlist everything and just like arranging and stuff like that. So, I mean, at the time, I didn't know that I would take to recording. It wasn't till I started working for Gucci, because that was just the first job I had. And I was recording all day, and I was like, yeah, I could see myself doing this.
So let's talk about that, because I feel like in a lot of interviews with you, it's like you went to school and then all of a sudden you're working at Brick Factory with Gucci Mane, and it's like, how did that happen? But there's some stuff that happened in between there. You're talking about how hard it actually is to get into being an engineer at a studio and all of the like networking and stuff you had to do. So do you want to talk about that a bit and how that kind of led to getting into Brick Factory?
Yeah, so while I was in school, I was sitting in under Seth Firkins, who has passed away, but he worked for
Futures engineer.
Futures engineer, and I was also sitting on Gucci sessions, and Gucci knew I was in school, so once I finished, that's right around the time he was opening Brick Factory, and he has an engineer. His name is Sean Payne, but I guess he worked so much he needed a second engineer, and he had all these artists. He had Migos at the time, Thug, Scooter, Waka Flocka, Pee Wee Longway, Young Dolph. All of them were, and then all the hottest Atlanta producers. It was like Zaytoven would come, Mike Will, Metro Boomin, Honorable Cino, just it was just like, it really was like a factory of like artists and producers coming in and out. And so I guess he knew that. I didn't know that at the time. And he knew he would need another engineer. So he hired me, and I started working for him, but he got locked up. I think he got locked up twice when I was working for him. The second time, it was the longest time. So I had to like start over from square one. And I had a resume with all these artists, because at that time they were like blowing up. And I was taking my resume to studios, because I treated it like a normal job. And all the studios were like fully staffed, and they said, you know, we'll call you if one of our engineers isn't available. So, you know, that was like a slow process for someone to not be available, and they called me. So I had to end up interning all over again. And I think it's important as an engineer to understand the area that you live in. And I quickly picked up that the studios that I was interning at, there wasn't a job for me. So it's like, what are you trying to accomplish?
When you say area, do you mean like the city or like the kind of scene, or both?
Both, or like the city. So like I feel like if you intern in LA for a certain amount of time, you will get a job. Or you'll start off as an assistant engineer, then you become a recording engineer, like that. It wasn't quite like that in Atlanta at every studio. So I just used it as a way to network. So I interned at multiple studios. And being an intern there, they was like, well, she worked with this person. So when they didn't have an engineer, I got put in the session. On top of that, the other studios that I took my resume to were starting to call me. And it got to the point where, even though I wasn't a staff engineer, I was working as much as the staff engineers, because everybody was requesting me again. So I got booked up. Like, I was always busy doing back-to-back sessions. So it is hard, you know, trying to get into engineering, but if you stick it out, it works out.
One of the other things is that you were working so hard while you're like in this period where you're interning. You're even carrying around your desktop computer to your internships.
I interned at Music Box, which was Akon's studio, and it was like a job. We were there 8 hours, and I was broke. So like all the runs I was doing, my car was running out of gas. So I had to use the girl at the front desk, Devaney's car, to do some of the runs. But since I was there so long, in between the runs, I wanted to stay productive and just work on things that I learned in school. I didn't have a laptop then, so I just got the whole like computer and brought the whole box and worked at the studio.
And then I think it's also kind of interesting, the story of how when Gucci called you, or when he asked you to work for him, he actually first asked you to work for him as an assistant.
Yeah, he was like, engineer, you can be my assistant. I'm like, I don't want to be an assistant, but I was like, no, just get his number and call him, because he told me to call him the next day. So I called him, and he was like, you engineer, who you engineer it for? And at the time, I didn't have much of a resume, but I did record Scooter, because he was like part Free Bands, part Brick Squad. So I would see him in Future session. And when Seth, got done recording Future, like his Free Bands would like want to record, and Seth will let me record them to like learn and be put in the hot seat. And Scooter was one of the people I recorded, and that session did not go well. Scooter told Seth she's too slow, she can't keep up. I only want you to engineer me. So when Gucci, I told him that I worked with him. He was like, oh, I know Scooter, let me call him, I'll call you back. I was like, oh, he's not gonna call back. So yeah, he didn't call me back, and I was like, dang, maybe I should follow up with him. So I was like, hey, just checking to see if you spoke with Scooter. And he was like, yeah, he said you good, come to Patchwork at 8 o'clock. And then that's how I started working with him from there. But I was sitting in, and I remember a couple sessions where Staffa was recording him. And then, yeah, when he got the studio, it was Sean Payne. And Sean Payne really did help me record fast. So you do like a record track, and then you drop it down. And then, like I say, I like to playlist, because sometimes I'll take certain takes and like add it back into the song, like them talking, or a lighter flick or whatever.
Let's play a song from around this time. It's a Gucci Mane song. You didn't record Gucci on this, but you recorded Young Thug. This is Guwop, Home. So that was a track called Guwop, Home, by Gucci Mane featuring Young Thug. You recorded Thug's vocals on that track.
Yeah.
Can you talk about recording Young Thug? What is that like?
Thug is probably the reason why I'm fast, because he doesn't like much pre-roll before he punches in. So he sometimes even just want to hear one word and then punch in. And then I'm trying to playlist while he's doing that. Sometimes if the playlist gets too long, I just kind of stop. But he knows what take he wants to go back to. So he would like go back to the 5th take and use that one. And then he always wants stuff nudged. But I like working with that, because like I said, I get to be really fast. And now he tells me to like slow down. I'm like, what? But yeah, it's dope recording him. And yeah, that song they sent in an open verse, and I just did Thug's part, and then we sent it back.
What can you tell us about, so you've worked with Seth Firkins, who was Future's engineer, Sean Payne, who's Gucci's engineer, and also you've kind of got to sit with Mike Larson, I believe, who's Pharrell's engineer.
That's how I kind of got my start. Everybody already had their engineers, but they heard about me and they heard how I worked, and they still wanted to work with me. So, I'd be a fill-in engineer a lot of times. So once their engineer wasn't available, or some people work all the time, so if their engineer is 6 to 6, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., I'm 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., and then I go to like another session. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue into kind of getting a little bit of understanding into what your your days look like. It's not easy being an engineer. So can you talk about your average day, which I imagine there's no average day?
Yeah, it changes a lot, but right now, I travel a lot, so it's like I'll fly somewhere to work. We'll work however many days. I'll fly home just to repack and wash, fly back out, straight to the studio. Sometimes I don't even take my bags to the hotel. I'm there all day. Sometimes we don't even shower. Sometimes, like, I mean, we don't go too long without. But, yeah, like, I'm just always in the studio. Then if a song's coming out, then my workload, like, doubles or triples, because now I'm recording and I'm mixing, and recording never stops. And then you got to do the clean version, and then there's file management. And I don't know, my normal day is just be in the studio and just flying. I'm in the airport a lot and just repacking and preparing for the next session.
What do you think is the key to working with artists that keep unconventional schedules or are traveling a lot?
The key is to not have a life. Always be available. And I just try to sleep light, so if I get the call, I can just go and, be ready.
And do you get time to sleep during sessions?
Oh, I get my sleep in. Like, if, there is a lot of downtime when you're in the studio hours like that. Like, there's times where they just want to chill and talk to their friends, or when they eat, or when or a producer's, making a beat. And those are the times where I just, like, take a nap. So I don't go too long without sleeping. Like, the most I'll do is, I used to, one time with Gucci, I know I was up for like 3 days. I would try not to do that and stuff like that, because it's just not good for you, but I'll be up 2 days. Like, I can do that.
Also, I feel like in hip-hop, it's not necessarily just a quiet, calm studio vibe. Like, there's probably a lot of people around. How do you work when, like, the control room is just, like, filled with people?
Yeah, I don't ever try to, like, tell people to hush or anything, because I don't know, I don't want to change any kind of vibe. Like, because if they're comfortable, then Uzi's or the artist is comfortable, and they're essentially there for him. And, if it gets too loud, I'll just turn it. I like having everything low, but if it gets too loud, I'll just turn it up, or I'll wear headphones if it gets that loud. And then, yeah. It is chaotic, though. It's just food, snacks everywhere, people, but it's cool, it's chill.
Also, I feel like, what do you think is kind of the key trait of a good engineer, the key personality trait? Because, I said this to you yesterday, I feel like you can't really have an ego while doing this work.
Yeah, I don't think you can, because a lot of artists, they get frustrated because they know what they want, and if you're adding too much verbally and kind of pushing your ideas, it kind of takes away from them, and it's all about them. So I don't like talking to the artists. Like, I don't press the playback button. If I didn't hear them, I'll do what I think they said. So if I didn't, do what they said, they'll repeat it. So I don't say, "What did you say?" or whatever. But and then too, I just think, I don't know. I feel like depending on the artist is how you need to be. And Leslie also told me that, because sometimes I get worried that I'm too quiet, and I can tell some people are trying to get me to get out of my shell. And I'm like, when you're meeting someone for the first time, or if you're really shy, it's kind of hard to do that. But I've been in sessions with other engineers, like, I don't bob my head and, like, do all that stuff to the music. And I can tell some artists kind of want to feed off of you whether you like their song or not. So I've seen other engineers do that, and that really works for them, and for me, it works for me to be really quiet, and, and I know some engineers to really talk and engage with the artist. So I think it varies on the artist, and as an engineer, I don't think you have to be one kind of way, But you do need to be able to pick up and read people, because if you are talking too much, you need to know to dial back.
What was it like? So you've worked with Uzi, for the last 4 years or so. But, this year you've done a bunch of stuff with Childish Gambino. Can you talk a bit about how different are those studio sessions?
Completely different. Childish is his own kind of genius in his way. He spends a lot of time on records. He thinks it through. He knows exactly what he wants. And I don't know, he's just so dope. And even working with him, I just saw live instruments, African instruments, and I don't know, it's just dope just seeing his sessions. Of course, it's track outs, and it's dope when someone like that brings you on and they allow you to be who you are as an engineer and add what you want. And of course, it's always ultimately what they want, but I just appreciate it when people just want me to do my thing on something. But, it was my first time really working with him, so I didn't want to jump in and just start doing stuff to his songs. But he's so dope, and yeah.
Let's hear one of the songs that you worked on with Childish Gambino. Okay. This is Feels Like Summer. And it's a different vibe. So that was Feels Like Summer by Childish Gambino. What can you tell us about recording that track?
Got to record that in Hawaii, the most beautiful view. And wanted to say his engineer is Riley, so it was his setup. And like I said, I got brought on to work with him, but he would do all the other recording. I just do the vocals, so it was dope.
I think you were telling me he recorded that in the room, right? Not in the booth?
Oh yeah, it was a house. So it was one of the rooms in the house, and then the booth was the next room over.
Was that a challenge for you? Had you worked in that way before?
Yeah, I work like that with surprisingly, a lot of these bigger artists, they do work in the studio, but sometimes you just want to get a different vibe. So a lot of times they'll travel somewhere and get a really nice house and just set up there and record. We did that with Uzi when he was working on Love Is Rage 2. We went to Hawaii, and we did have a studio, but all of us were jet lagged, and the house was so far from the studio that by the time we got there, we all would just pass out. And, Cannon peeped that, and he, had a solution just to record at the house. So that's something a lot of artists do.
And you were also saying that you haven't really you've mostly recorded vocals only, but you want to get into recording instruments.
If I work with the producer, we'll record more instruments than vocals. But if it's just an artist, they pretty much already have their track. You may, bring it in or whatever, but it's just vocal recording. But I do want to get into recording instruments. So I plan on, when I get back to Philly, me and my assistant, we're going to mic up drums and, just record the drums so I can have my own sound bank. So, yeah.
Cool. What do you think can you elaborate a bit more on that in terms of how you think that's going to kind of change your working process? Or maybe it's, what do you think is missing from your working process now that learning to record instruments might add?
I think I'm missing creativity, because I used to be so creative, and I used to try stuff, but then I kind of got out of it because songs were coming out at such a fast pace that it just took me out of my element. And then just adding the whole traveling aspect, you just don't feel creative anymore. So when I go back to Philly this time, I plan on being there for a while, and this will just give me time to just, try different things, and then bring it in, because even though I record, like I said, I add things to the beat. So, you know, I used to like take parts of the beat and then almost do like sound design and create a different sound and place it in different parts of the beat. And I just think it would be cool if I had my own sounds as an engineer and my own presets with vocals, so, you know, I can quickly add things as my ideas come to me, because a lot of times they come at once, and I can't get them out, and then I lose them. So, you know, I just want to be prepared, so when I do feel creative, I have everything set up, and I'm going to do, like, a different template this time. I'm going to make, like, a super template and have way more aux tracks with effects and stuff.
We've talked a lot about your work with rappers, but you've also recorded singers. I guess Donald Glover kind of is a little bit of both. But there's some other singers that you've worked with. So do you want to talk just a little bit about maybe some of the differences in terms of your working process when it comes to a rapper versus a singer?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I have my template I use pretty much for everybody, then I adjust the parameters within it. And then once they're done recording, I'll add in more plugins. But I always have one track. Once I get the key, I duplicate that. So for rappers, I only duplicate it like 11 times. For singers, I do way more. And I don't ever I've seen templates where people pre-pan, so they'll have tracks already panned, but I like to just go off the vibe of the song and do all that as I go. And then I always like to organize the session based on parts. So if it's a verse, that gets its section, and then the hook will be another section, the second verse, hook, and then if it's like a bridge. And the key is just to be like super organized, have the key, have the tempo. When you have the tempo, that's how you can work really fast, because you can just fly the hook over. So as an engineer, I arrange the song. So sometimes rappers don't know how to count bars, so they don't know when to stop for the hook or the verse. So whatever they do for that first part, a lot of people do know like the bigger part of the track out is the hook. And if that doesn't come in first, I'll move that part to the beginning and I'll arrange the beat. So if it's a more calm part, that'll be the verse. And then, you know, sometimes I try to make it where if they have a lot going on in the beat, the second verse beat is different. And, you know, I'll just format the song as they go. So when they hear the hook again, they know to stop, and that's the end of the first verse. And so it's the same with singers. It's more vibey, but, you know, some people are very unorthodox. They may not have a 12-bar verse and an 8-bar hook. So, you know, you gotta like pick up on what, especially like if rappers, if they're going crazy as far as like what they're saying, I don't ever stop them. I just let them like keep going and we'll format later. But working with singers is just a lot more going on, more tracks, more panning. Yeah.
Does it feel like some of the people that you've worked with, which some people may hear about in the future, it feels like they are more structured, I guess, in terms of their working process than with rappers who might just like come in and you're pulling up beats and they're just like trying different ideas, whereas maybe with some of these artists, they're kind of going in with a concept. How does that change? Does that change things for you, actually, when a session is more structured, I guess?
It doesn't. I guess like if I'm working with someone for the first time, it's really just about trying to pick up on their lingo and like how they want to do things, and just kind of sitting back more so observing before I make a move. But as far as rappers, it's pretty set, you know, as far as especially like the structure of the song and stuff like that.
So I thought one last thing that we could do before we end is talk about, kind of elaborate on where we started off, which is your ideas about engineering and things that you think are, you know, kind of the secret that engineers kind of bring to a track. And so I asked you about a song that you love from an engineering perspective, and I was happy to discover that it's a Rihanna song. So we're gonna listen to some Rihanna. This is Where Have You Been? We're both really, really big fans of that song. Yeah. So you did not work on that, let's be clear. That was, I think it was recorded by Kukarel, who's the legend, and Serban.
By Serban. He's my favorite, or one of my favorite mix engineers. And the kick sounds amazing, and just like the blend on the vocals. And I know when you're working in a session that has a lot going on, a lot of the frequencies can clash, and it just, everything has its own space, and I freaking love that song.
Can you tell me about Serban Guinea and why you think he's so good at what he does? He's also done Bruno Mars and
Ariana Grande. Anytime I hear a song and I'm like, who mixed it? It's him. So that's how he became my favorite. Like, I was listening to one of Ariana's songs, and then I looked up Untitled, and I saw his name. So,
what do you think? What do you think it is that he's bringing to these pop songs that are kind of changing the dynamic of what we're hearing?
It's just so clean, and like I said, everything has a space, and it's not like, I don't know, I can't explain it. It's just, and I notice on his mixes when you turn it, I don't know if that's a mastering thing, but when you turn it up, it does something different, and I just think it's dope. Like, I don't know. I can't explain it. He's just fire.
Okay, well, I think that's a great place to end this portion of the lecture. Thank you very much, Kesha Lee.
Thank you.
So now, questions for Kesha.
Hi, Kesha.
Hey.
I love your work, and I wanted to ask you, like, do you have, you said that you have, like, presets for already done for, like, whenever you start to record, and I wanted to ask you if you have, like, different presets for each singer that you record. For example, like, Gucci's, like, more on the lower end, and, like, Uzi is on the high end, and Childish is more, like, dynamic. It goes, like, to, like, on a long range of frequencies.
If I work with the artist a lot, they do, once I, work with their voice and a lot, I bounce down a different, or I export a different template. So I'll change, like I said, the parameters. It's pretty much the same, but I just change the parameters to fit more towards their voice. And then the effects are the same, and then as I grow as an engineer, I just start adding more to the template. But for the most part, it's the same. It's just certain people, I don't use the stuff at the bottom, like the synths and stuff, but yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Hi.
Hi.
So I'm from the Philippines, and I work with a lot of singers and rappers as well. But I'm not so educated with how the money flow works in terms of, like, how does one get paid? Is it like, do you guys get cut with the royalties? Do you guys get paid up front? And because it's such a mystery to us. It's like, for me as like a producer, sometimes I'm a recording engineer as well. Like, I don't know how to ask, or I don't know, like, even if you ask the artist or the labels that manage them, it's like they always give you this, like, deal, and you don't know if that's what's going on, because it's sort of like a mystery to me. Yeah.
Yeah, starting out, my pay was all over the place. And I would take whatever hourly they would give me. I wouldn't ask for more. I would even work for free sometimes, because a lot of people don't realize it. Free gets you very far. If you don't have, like, the credentials yet, they're willing to give you a chance so then you can prove yourself. And then they want to pay you. You don't even have to ask. But some places I would get cash. That would be the artist paying me right after the session. If I worked for a studio, sometimes they had their schedule. So it was 1 or 2 weeks, and it was a written check. And then once you start working with bigger artists, it becomes invoice. You don't ever get paid cash. And so it'll be like net 30 or net 45. You get paid every 30 or 45 days once you put in the invoice. Once you start moving up, you can get moved to priority, and you don't have to wait that long. And you set your hourly. I feel like it's best to do it based off of what you feel you're worth, but don't go crazy, you know. And as you get, how I did it is, as I got better, I increased my hourly. So each year I'd go up. But starting out, I just took whatever people offer me. And as far as asking, it's so uncomfortable. And I never asked. That's what I'm saying. I work for free sometimes. And it just got to the point where people wanted to pay me because of how I was working. But if you're dealing with a label, your point of contact is either the manager or the A&R, or just whoever contacted you to work with that artist. I try not to ever speak to the artist, like not even outside of work. So I definitely wouldn't ask them about pay unless y'all are just like cool like that. But that's the last person you want to go to, because you know you want to keep it creative with them and the money with the business people.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks so much for your lecture. I would have a very technical question, because you were talking about being quick with tracking vocals, and I watched a lecture by Alex Tomei, who's Thug's engineer,
Yeah.
and he's talking about like, and you also talked about people like Thug being very specific about doing certain takes in a specific way. One more time, and I wanted to ask you if you have any specific approaches. Do you have one recording track, and do you like drop it down and like do sort of like a Frankenstein out of lots of takes? Just like take out the best. Like,
Yeah.
what's your approach to like reassemble different takes?
I mean, there's different ways to record, and definitely do what works fast for you. So I've seen engineers record on the same track that they're gonna keep the take on. For me, it works better if I have a record track and I drop it down. If the waveform overlaps, the verse will have 2 tracks. So it'll be 1 or 2 lines, and then the next 2 lines. Ad-libs always separate everything. Ad-libs second, its own track. And then I playlist everything, because there are artists where they want, I'll go back to that next take. With singers, like I comp as we go. So if they had a better take, I'll playlist everything. You can also rate a take, but I don't ever do that. I just kind of remember which line that it was, and I drop it back up, and it just helps to playlist. But a lot of times you may not use it, but it's there just in case they want you to go back, and they'll know what take, or as an engineer, you'll know which one sounds better if they trust you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a pretty simple question. Do you have many female colleagues in that scene, like especially as an engineer, or had there been like a moment where you felt like uncomfortable, like in that quite male-dominant world? Or how did you experience this at all? Like,
It's not that many females right now. Like, I don't ever run across one. I think it would be like in the studio. I think it would be so dope, because I'm there with all these guys, and it's just cool to have female energy. But like I said, my assistant, she's a female, so she's gonna be around. But I have noticed there are a lot of female engineers and producers, and I just feel like they may not be as known as some people. But there's Laura Sisk. She worked with Taylor Swift. Oh no, there's one other really dope girl. There's Wonder Girl, she does beats. There's Marcella Lago. Ann Mancilli, she's Alicia Keys' engineer. So there's a lot of women. There are not that many times that I feel uncomfortable. One time I feel uncomfortable when there's like certain things lying around in the studio, but for the most part, everybody is really, really respectable. And I haven't had, thank God, you know, any bad instances. And I just feel like it's how you may, you know, carry yourself, or, you know, like, I don't ever have that persona where, like, conversate with me, you know, because I'm focused on the screen, so no one ever really tries to talk. And when the session's over, I leave. I don't stick around. So that's what helps, I feel like, keep a lot of things maybe at bay. So.
We had Mandy Parnell, who's an engineer in last term, and she gave a great lecture as well, so you'll be able to see that. Emily Lazar is also another one that I can think of, an engineer who's really great. So.
Hi, my name's Sequoia. I'm from Atlanta.
Oh, what's up?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I enjoyed hearing you talk about wanting to get back to your own creativity when you go back to Philly. And I was just wondering if you were to start recording your own music, or, you know, I know you were talking about getting your drum presets, you know, to have your specific sound, but if you started working on your own music again, who would you want to engineer your music? Who would you trust to do that for you?
You know what? His name is Blake. I think it's Blake Blizzy on Instagram. Sometimes I'll put snippets up. So sometimes I record myself to practice, because I don't ever want to try something new on the artist sometimes. And, you know, sometimes that's how I get my presets. And then sometimes I put like a snippet, and he's one of my favorite engineers. He did Travis Scott Butterfly, and all the effects in that song is just so fire. And he DM'd me, and he was like, if you ever need an engineer, like, let me know. And I was like, what? So, you know, definitely him. And I would want my assistant to record me, because, you know, I'm just...
She knows how to do that? She's...
I'm training her.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, I'm
Hi.
Tonika. I was wondering, you were telling stories where you had to record low vocals, like in places apart from perfectly set up studios, like a touring bus and some houses around the world. So, is there any advice you can give us about like home studio recording? Because I don't have a perfect setup at home.
Yeah. I just realized mic selection is probably the most important. You don't ever want to have to fix something in the mix. So if you can pick the perfect mic for your voice, and then, you know, just pick a simple, clean preamp if you do, and then record. I know it sounds weird, but record in the closet with clothes. A lot of people take all that stuff out and then they put up their own acoustics, but with the clothes is fine. And I've worked with artists who are very unorthodox. They record in like churches, hallways. You can really make it work, because a lot of people, I feel like engineers, they get so technical, but after the song comes out, a lot of people don't know these things, like it was recorded in this space to give it this ambiance. You know, you just enjoy the record. So don't overthink it, but definitely get the best recording you can. But a closet or foamforyou.com, they sell foam for really cheap, and they have all different thickness. So that's a really dope thing, and you know you can put that up. But I use the Chaotica. Chaotica is pretty dope. Yeah.
What was that again? The name?
Chaotica, K-A-O-T-I-C-A. It's the ball that goes around the mic. And then, you know, they have mic guards too. So yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
Whenever you're working with like Migos, how is like what would be like the FX chain for like the ad libs? Cause like Migos ad libs are like amazing, and they like really make up the song. They're like like the Migos voices is like another instrument, you know. It's not even like a vocal anymore. It's just like I don't know, like.
Yeah, no, their stuff is fire. Actually, I haven't recorded them since Gucci days. So Mixed by Tilly is their recording engineer. So I'm sure if you DM'd him on like Instagram, he would answer that. But yeah, their stuff sounds fire. When I was working for Gucci, like I said, Sean Payne was his engineer. So when you're someone's engineer, they have their template. And you know, I was still learning, so I was using the template that he had for everybody. And you know, as I was recording people, I came up with my own template. So I definitely don't want to take credit for that. But you know, I've recorded them before, and like I said, I just used my template and adjusted to their voice. But the records that you're probably talking about that you heard, it's Mixed by Tilly, most likely.
Okay. So there'll also be a studio science session, I think tomorrow, so you'll get to see more of Kesha at work. Everyone, please say thank you to Kesha Lee for being here.